Welcome back to CivilNet. My guest is Vicken Cheterian from Geneva, Switzerland. Vicken is the author of many scholarly articles, a book on the post-Soviet democratic processes, but most recently the author of a book that is to be published in January 2015 called Open Wounds, Armenians, Turks, and a Century of Genocide. Could not have a better guest on a day like this. Thanks for joining us, Vicken.
Thank you, Sophie.
Armenians, Turks, and a Century of Genocide. So you're really not talking about Talat Pasha's third telegram or the fourth village that got deported and evacuated. What's the axis of the book?
No, I'm not talking about the past. I consider that there has been excellent books in the last 10 years written about the history and putting it in context.
You're right,
and
it's 10 years. Yeah.
Yes, in the last 10 years,
You're right.
amazing books. There has been something like 5,000 books written about the Armenian genocide. So we have done enormous effort. My take is, how can we bring the past in our today's political reality? What happened in 1915? Does it still have a place in politics today? So I started with this idea, and I started my investigation something like 3 years back, and what I discovered amazes me.
You'll tell us how it amazes you, but first define, when you say in our politics, who is our and what kind of politics? Are we just talking about the Republic of Armenia and its foreign policy?
By our, I mean humanity, because what happened in 1915, it's not just ours as Armenians, it's part of human experience, and I take it as such. And my question is, does 1915 concern humanity today? Do we have to be, as humans, as someone living far away from the Middle East, from the Caucasus, in Geneva, in Paris, in New York, wherever, in Vladivostok, do they have to be worried about what happened back in 1915? And I think they should.
Well, you said the responses or the results of the research was amazing. Tell us, examples.
It's amazing on two levels. One is to see how the genocide did not end. Genocide continues, and not just by the policy of negation that Turkey adopted ever since the Kemalists took power. No, there are so many elements of that mind frame which led to the destruction of the Armenians still continues. And this makes the 1915 genocide a fundamental question for all of Turkey. In case Turkey wants to be a democratic, free country, they have to go back to the original sin and rework on it. So
the consequences, the fact that there is no closure, the fact that the issues are still on the table, is fundamentally driven by the fact that there is state denial? Or are there aspects of this continuity that are not Turkey denial conditioned, based?
I mean, because the state denies what happened back in 1915, they don't have any reason to stop the policies of discrimination against minorities. And not just specifically Armenians, but the state did not learn how to behave with the otherness within its own society. And this otherness was defined as the Christians in a certain period of history, and not in all of Ottoman history. One should be very careful. I mean, the way Armenians and other Christians were targeted, this is very new in Ottoman history. It's in the last quarter of a century of the Ottoman history. And as a result, they didn't learn, the modern Turkish Republic didn't learn how to behave with other minorities. And the Kurdish problem is one of them. The Kurds were part of the majority in late Ottoman period. And once the other minority was not there anymore,
they became the other.
They had to create other minorities. And once they created new minorities, the only thing they could do with them was to repress them.
I'm going to rephrase what you said, because at the end of the day, this is the beginning and the end of both the causes of genocide and the consequences of genocide. What you're saying, if I've understood you right, is that just as genocide was a political act by a state that chose to resolve political problems within the state by doing away with its own population, part of its own population. The fact that it got away with it, the fact that it was not addressed as such, framed as such, means that they can continue to negatively interact with as parts of their own population. Perhaps not as far as genocide, but...
Yes, I mean, when there's no force within your own society or from outside your society, within the international political system, to stop such behaviors, you think that such behaviors are efficient, are effective, they give results, and you go on doing that. And as a result, you don't create another political culture whereby you don't see minorities as danger, as threats to your integrity, uniform state and society. So you identify them as something dangerous, and as a result, you have to fight them. So there's different mechanisms which creates this aggressive way of behaving, this aggressive political culture that we see continuing in the Middle East ever since.
So if we want to be cynical, we can even say that the recent, in the last year and a half perhaps, the statements by individual Kurds in Turkey, organizations, individuals, even Öcalan, can perhaps be attributed to the fact that they have now found themselves in that same space of being the other, the potentially dangerous, threatening. And so now they're responding to us in a different way.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was traveling recently in Turkey, meeting with Kurds from Turkey, as well as in my recent meetings with Kurds from Syria and elsewhere, the consciousness that now they are the Armenians of today, and by recognizing the Armenian genocide and what happened to the Armenians, it's a self-defense mechanism. Because not only Armenians are threatened by this kind of behavior, but also other minorities can be targeted by such mechanism. And the Kurds are extremely conscious about this today.
The reality is that all these decades, we in Armenia, we in diaspora who have said, genocide must be recognized because if you don't recognize it, it gets repeated. We've never put meat on those bones of that statement. What you're doing is putting meat on the bones of that statement, that these are the ways that a genocide denied and unacknowledged can continue to wreak havoc on a population. That's what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think what we have done in the past was very much considering the genocide only our affair. And we could not also translate this into a language where we can make it universal. Of course, there are many people who have done enormous work, but not enough. You know,
not in the popular discourse, certainly.
Yes. And we should be very conscious that when we are asking the rest of the world to recognize the genocide, then it should also be a historical experience which can bring lessons, which can also help other societies, other civilizations, other people to learn from it. And it should be universal, otherwise it can't be.
Now I'm going to make another leap. Your explanation also helps understand the situation and the reactions of the Armenian community of Istanbul, for example, the survivors, the real survivors, the ones who stayed, not you and me, whose grandparents are a different kind of survivor. But these people stayed and they continued to survive. And yet, those of us who look into that community from the outside, from Armenia, we look at them, from diaspora, we say, they're still scared. And look at how they don't interact, and look at how they don't stand up for their rights, and look at how Atatürk's picture is still on the wall. And that's very hard to understand. But your explanation helps explain that situation.
Yes, you should also mention that there's the Istanbul Armenian community, which has enormous freedom within the Turkish context. And then there are Armenian communities surviving halfway in their Armenian identity in the rest of Turkey. And those people are even in more difficult circumstances. I mean, many we are discovering this in the last couple of years. Many people are coming out and saying, well, my grandparents were Armenian. They were forced to become Muslim, Turkish, Kurdish, whatever. And now I want to rediscover my Armenianness. And we have no right to judge them. We have to discover and try to understand how these people for 100 years survived on their land, in the same village, next to the perpetrator, next to the sheikh or
in the same family as the perpetrator.
In the same
sometimes.
family, yes. So it's extremely painful, and me, I can't even imagine that I can one day learn the pain these people suffered for 100 years.
And unfortunately, we have not taken the time, and perhaps it is not the right time, to actually try to put words to those experiences, whether it's oral history or some other kind of documentation. The Hrant Dink Foundation has been doing a great deal in that direction. But this is something that's going to be, I don't know, extremely difficult to understand and to explain, it seems, so that the Armenian communities of Turkey can become part of the segment of Turkish society that is striving for democratization within Turkey. Because without that, we're not going to get the acknowledgement we want either, nor are they going to get the peaceful, serene life they want.
Yes, as you said, Hrant Dink Foundation did a marvelous conference in Istanbul in November last year. I was there. I was very honored to be part of the audience there, listening and taking notes. And it's not by chance, as we say in Armenia, that this step was taken by Hrant Dink Foundation. It was Hrant's dream. Hrant himself comes from Malatya. He was born there, and so he's from the east, and he knew about this. He had many friends coming from different provinces, and it was his dream to give voice to these people and to help them come out of the dark.
Okay, so let's jump a little bit. We started talking about your book, the content, this message. Let's take it one step further. Look, it's 99 years. Next year is 100. People expect all sorts of things from us, all of us, the global us. I don't know what we will end up doing. We'll see. But for sure, I think we need to change the discourse, the way in which we present our issues, our demands for justice, and what we want to see happen next. We can assume that in a year the Turkish government is not likely to say, vai, all of this is wrong, bad, let's move on in a different way, right? Let's put that aside. Let's assume the 100th year will be some version of the 99th year. How do we begin to redefine the international discourse on our continued need to talk about this 100 years later?
Yeah, I just mentioned that genocide was an Armenian experience, but not only. It was, there were other minorities who were destroyed during the First World War. The Greeks, the Assyrians, the Yazidi Kurds. So we have to manage to move from our pain, from our suffering, and to have a voice which is universal, to include all victims. This is one thing. And the other thing, which is also very delicate, is that when we talk about the genocide, there are two levels. There's one level which should be very moral. We should seek justice. And we should never forget that we are seeking justice. And there's another level, which is a very political level. So Prime Minister Erdogan's declaration yesterday, that's on the political level. So we should have all the means and all the necessary culture to counter that and to answer and to engage him in a dialogue in a political sense without forgetting the high level, without forgetting that we are seeking justice.
I want to rephrase the first thing that you said because I'm afraid either I misunderstood you or we may get misunderstood. So you tell me if I'm right. What you are saying is that we need to acknowledge that there's a whole lot of pain to go around. A lot of people suffered in different ways. You are not necessarily saying that all of the suffering was of the same kind or the same intent, because that is also what Erdogan is trying to say, right? He's saying we all suffered, we suffered, you suffered, it's terrible, let's move on. My response as an Armenian is, yeah, we did all suffer and we do need all to move on. However, we also need to call things by their name. When you set out to destroy a whole people and their way of life, that is different than this other terrible thing, which is moving a whole population, or this other terrible thing, which is killing 100,000 people. All of these are terrible things. They're not the same thing.
I agree with you completely. I mean, there's something very specific about the Armenian genocide. I mean, it's the most extreme of the crimes. Destroying a whole nation, a whole people, culture from its roots. So there's something very specific. And this is ours. But we have to enter into a dialogue, into an exchange with the rest of humanity. And we can do that only when we also acknowledge the suffering of the others. And this is what Hrant did. You know, he talked to the Turk and he said, I will talk to your conscience. And he managed doing that. And in case we are asking for the rest of the world to understand our suffering, and we are doing that, we should also have an open heart to see the suffering of the other, including that of the Turk, the Kurd, those who have blood on their hands. You know, we should also understand how we can talk to them, and only then we will be able to, as Hrant did, to be able to take a step forward.
Thank you. This is a conversation we need to have not just on April 24th. I'm kind of proud to say we do try to have this conversation during the year. But thank you, Vicken Cheterian, for being here and helping us think through what we need to be articulating, saying, sharing in the 100 years to come, because this is not over. And one of the people who is here to help us try to understand the issues in the way in which we are studying them is Nazan Maksudian, who is a professor in Turkey and who studies children in the Ottoman Empire. The status of children, the issues affecting children, the customs that affected the adoption of children, sometimes not so willingly. And this is a Skype interview we conducted with her earlier this week.